So since I was a little girl, I always dreamed of being a teacher. I would line up all my stuffed animals and read them books and teach them how to add. But I must have needed some practice because they never seemed to really know the right answer. But that never broke my spirits. As an elementary student, I would spend many recesses going to other classes and helping students out with their work. This continued through high school, where I worked as a tutor in an after-school program. A reason why I was so passionate to become a teacher was partly because my parents are teachers. My mother teaches first grade, and my father teaches fifth. Many of my summers included going to their classrooms and helping them set up butcher paper on their walls, creating reading folders, putting up borders, and sharpening pencils. I learned early on that it took a lot of time and commitment to be a teacher, and it made me aspire to join my parents' profession that much more. It was surprising then for me to be asked by my father my junior year of high school when I was applying for colleges what I wanted to be. When I responded teacher, he just shook his head. There's too much politics in education, he told me, and followed up with telling me how much work it was and how much crap you constantly have to deal with as a teacher. And he wasn't speaking about families and children. As many teenagers do, I didn't follow my parents' advice and became a teacher anyway. So I am now currently a fourth grade teacher at Buena Vista Horace Mann K-8 school, and I'm proud of my profession. After 6 years of teaching, I have come to realize, though, that my father was completely right about how much teachers work, how politics play a major role in education, and the crap that we face. One thing that my father was wrong in, however, was trying to encourage me not to become a teacher, because it has been through my personal experiences as an educator that I've gained the passion to be part of the ongoing fight to defend public education, rather than simply dealing with the attacks and growing number of budget cuts. Currently, education budgets are being slashed across the country. Schools are shutting down, classroom sizes are swelling, and educational resources are lacking. Poverty, which is known to adversely impact students, is on the rise. Schools, particularly those that serve working and oppressed people, are operating on insufficient budgets. Contrary to the image being promoted in the press about lazy teachers just doing it for the money, educators are among the most self-sacrificing workers. Teachers across the country plan their lessons and grade assignments off the clock. Many pay for classroom materials out of their own pockets, so their students will not have to do without. By taking furloughs, foregoing pay increases, shouldering more health and pension costs, and agreeing to other concessions, public education workers have made many sacrifices to keep their schools running. As much as we defend public education and the public school system, we have to acknowledge that public education has failed to come close to providing the same level of education to all students. Inequities persist, and there is no prospect of them going away. These conditions are made even worse by the growing attacks on teachers and public education. And what is Obama's solution to all of this? To attack our pensions, promote merit pay, and incentivize charter schools. All these things go against everything unions have fought for: better working conditions for teachers and quality education for students. A current attack is Governor Brown's pension reform bill, AB 340, which shifts more cost to workers and cuts benefits for new hires. This will create another kind of two-tiered system, since employees hired on or after January 1st, 2013 will be put into a defined benefit retirement plan. The new law will also put a cap on how much of their earnings can be used to figure their pensions, a restriction not faced by already hired workers. The pension reform bill limits collective bargaining for pension benefits and the need for local school districts to negotiate with public unions. In addition to a likely reduction in benefits and increased payments by union members, this reduction in the ability to negotiate directly with districts on pensions is a primary reason why unions oppose the bill. As far as merit pay, it advocates the claim that it improves education for students by rewarding teachers who do a better job. The idea of merit pay comes straight from the corporate world and is based on the assumption that teachers will work harder and therefore improve their students' level of achievement if they are given an economic incentive. This idea is misleading. Teachers at better funded, high-performing schools will be rewarded, while the educators who have the greater challenge of giving quality education to students who come from struggling working-class families will be labeled bad teachers. In other words, merit pay punishes some of the most self-sacrificing educators for the adverse impact of the government's deliberate underfunding of public schools in working-class communities. At the heart of the merit pay drive is demonization efforts against teachers' unions. Merit pay seeks to replace hard-earned union wages and contracts. An education system without unions leaves teachers and students vulnerable in the hands of corporate-minded supervisors and capitalist politicians during a collapsing capitalist economy. Charter schools, another of Obama's brilliant solutions to save education, are also not supporting but in fact worsening public education. Arne Duncan, Obama's handpicked Secretary of Education, who by the way has no teaching credentials, was a key figure behind Chicago's Renaissance 2010 program, which favors private and charter schools at the expense of quality public education. Charter schools are an attempt to privatize public education as they are often corporately sponsored. Most charter schools function without teachers' unions. They also serve far less children with special needs, children who receive ELL services, and children who receive free lunch compared with their neighboring public schools. They also enroll students through lottery and do not have to take students during the school year and can dismiss students at will. Charter schools are nothing short of a tool in the resegregation of our public school system, further sorting and separating children, and straining and dividing already under-resourced neighborhoods. Studies have shown that merit pay in charter schools are not successful solutions. Studies performed at the National Center on Performance Incentives, NCPI, showed that there was no significant difference in students' achievement and test scores, regardless if their teachers were receiving merit pay. Research done by the Center for Research on Education Outcomes, a research group at Stanford, also showed that charter schools are twice as likely to make student achievement worse as they are to improve it. In other words, merit pay and charter schools are not the answer. The Institute of Education Sciences, the research arm of the United States Department of Education, however, concluded that class size reduction is one of only 4 evidence-based reforms that have been proven to increase student achievement through rigorous randomized experiments. The other 3 reforms are one-on-one tutoring by qualified tutors for at-risk readers in grades 1st through 3rd, life skills training for junior high students, and instruction for early readers in phonics, and not one of the policies that the corporate reformers are pushing. Other studies showed that the factors that led to better student outcomes were, once again, smaller classes and having an experienced teacher. So how do we improve public education and make sure that what really benefits students, like smaller class sizes and social and academic resources, become accessible to all students? The answer, demand more funding for our schools and take this to the streets, because the money is there. In Chicago, teachers did just that. They took a very important stand during a time of budget austerity, high unemployment, and an aggressive attack on unions by the ruling 1%. Students also joined the picket lines in large numbers. On September 10th, over 20,000 teachers and their allies shut down the streets around CPS headquarters. On September 12th, 3 large rallies were held in the middle of the day. Thousands participated at the rally held at Diet High School on the south side of Chicago. This was done despite the bogus anti-strike narrative, which says that teachers are greedy, lazy, and incompetent and want to maintain the status quo in Chicago public schools, while Chicago Mayor Rahm Emanuel is heroically fighting to implement reasonable reform measures that will fix a broken school system. Corporate newspapers like the New York Times, which denounced the strike in a recent editorial, harped on the alleged high salaries of the teachers, focusing on the figure $75,000 as a median salary, which of course is very, very much higher than starting salaries for teachers. But the focus on wages is a distortion. While teachers deserve to make a living wage, the strike was not primarily over wage increases. The focus of the strike was saving the public schools from a corporate reform takeover that aims to privatize the system and sell off the schools to the highest bidder. Against this corporate model, the CTU was raising many demands that are in the immediate interest of students, such as for smaller class sizes and funding for art programs and school libraries. The teachers were in fact fighting for true education reform in the interest of both teachers and students. Another key issue of the strike was that Emanuel and the CPS administration wanted to impose a teacher evaluation system, in which ultimately 40% of a teacher's evaluation would be based on standardized test scores of their students. Teachers were rightfully outraged by this for many reasons. For one, standardized test scores are an inaccurate measure of a teacher's contribution. It is well documented that success on these tests is best predicted by class background and the financial status of one's family. Such emphasis on testing means that teachers are being evaluated on something over which they have little control, the economic conditions of their students. Secondly, the weight given to testing in the CPS proposal will turn teaching into test prep tutoring, not true learning. Mayor Emanuel's own kids won't be subjected to this type of education. Why? Because he sends them to a pricey private school, where the director has resisted test-based teacher evaluations on the basis that it will reduce teaching and learning to a rote exercise devoid of creativity or critical thinking. So regardless of the ruthless attacks by Emanuel and the big wigs of the Democratic Party, on September 18th, the 800 House of Delegates declared victory and voted overwhelmingly to suspend the strike and send the tentative contract to the members for a ratification vote. The teachers' union has characterized the tentative contract as a victory based on a number of concessions that include the following. So no increases to health care premiums in return for enrollment in a wellness program. Chicago Public Schools must hire over 600 additional teachers in art, music, physical education, and other subjects. Limits on class size preserved, pushing back Mayor Emanuel's threats to remove all class size limits and crowd 55 students in the class. An increase in pay over what CPS was offering, defeated bogus merit pay demanded by CPS, keeping increased pay based on experience. Needed textbooks will be available for students on the first day of school instead of 6 weeks into the school year. Promotion of racial diversity in hiring at CPS, fighting the loss of African American teachers in Chicago schools, and lowered focus on standardized testing by beating down the percentage of the evaluations from test scores to the legal minimum and an appeal process to the evaluations. Chicago's rulers wanted the workers to stand aside as they steal from the teachers and pillage the public school system. But that didn't happen. The Chicago's teachers' biggest weapon was to struggle, organize, and be united. They are the only thing that can show poor and working people that the billionaires have no right to rule the education system or any part of our society. It was because of their perseverance and the support of their communities that the Chicago teachers prevailed and ended their strike. But brothers and sisters, despite this gain, the struggle is far from over. Attacks against education across the nation are increasing and are only getting worse. We too must stand up and defend public education. Like Chicago teachers and their communities proved, you can't succeed unless you are organized and in the streets demanding a quality education for all students. Here in the PSL, there are a number of teachers, and we are actively involved in our unions and in other struggles for social justice, including adequate funding for schools. Last year, we formed the mass organization Teachers for Public Education and have held several programs and organized contingents for marches. I encourage you all to join us in fighting together to ensure that students, no matter their background, socioeconomic status, or ethnicity, have equitable opportunities to an education that will focus on their specific needs. Let's fight together to put an end on all the attacks on education and have money put back into our schools rather than politicians' pockets and wars. Let's fight together for a better future where all students truly have an equal playing field from which they can grow and become successful members of our society. Education is a right, not a privilege, despite what politicians and the mass media might say. Join us in reminding them of this as we fight together in the streets, because as history has shown, it's been because of people organizing and fighting back that real change has occurred. Join us in demanding what is rightfully ours. Education is a right, not just for the rich and white. Thank you.